It's time for the 10 o'clock news if anybody out there is listening. Or you can go back and watch the video I seen. Seems like this little skirmish going on down here about this Venezuela shit, And you always go back to the leadership and you say, well, what doctrines are involved in all this Venezuelan skirmish? And then you find the truth about it is probably in some of the previous videos about things I've made. The it's all about the flow, of government and the flow of global hemispheres, and it gets down to the brass tacks, and people try to go back and they say, well, I know this and I know that, but I'm going to say that true facts are that it involves Cuba. And people say, I don't see how it can involve Cuba, but parts of the Communist Party of Cuba, uh, they actually empower people like Maduro and the drug cartels and stuff to bring you poison into the United States, in a sense, and cause chaos in that alone. They 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 support Maduro, and Maduro supports Cuba, and things going on there. But then you go back to the brass taxes of it and you say, Cuba gets its petroleum primarily from Venezuela. And rumor may have it that Russia don't charge Cuba anything. They just bring the oil to them, from Venezuela. It's sort of like a donation kind of thing going on there. The two suppliers of Cuba are going to be Russia and Venezuela. You can go fact check that if you want. Now, strategically, it is, like I said in a previous video, it's not in China or Russia's best interest to interfere in this little Western Hemisphere matter. Why? Is because if Russia wanted to bring Cuba some oil, it's got to come from the Black Sea through the Atlantic corridor around the tip of Florida through the Caribbean. Cuba has some offshore wells in production, and a couple of 2 or 3 refineries there on the island to supply the fuel, and that comes from Venezuela. So that'll define the foreign Russian and the Chinese incursion into Western Hemisphere American territory, and that digs them in a little little bit there to say, hey, we got friends in Cuba, we got friends in Venezuela, and we can open up shop in a sense. And it says that the people inside this country, they don't want that. They don't want Russian and Chinese and foreign influences, and it doesn't want. We don't want it to intrude our country anymore. I mean, it's drawing that line in the sand, and I know I mentioned about Canada and how the western provinces of Canada are looking to move away from Ottawa uh, and be their own sovereign state. Only because of the incursion, and then sparked that argument off about, okay, we have all these foreigners inside this country that are alien. And then there's a lot being said about Ethiopia going on. There's a lot about pigmentation, pigmented people. There's a lot of that going on. But the microscope right now just seems to be down on Ethiopia and the goings on in a third world environment where there really is no government in charge. It's based on a bunch of conglomerate of pirates and gangsters and dirty laundry. It's Somalia. It's on the Horn of Africa. That's where the pirates come from. What's left of them. And then whenever that certain culture comes into the American territory, the culture is fine as far as the beliefs and the way a person cooks their food and wears their clothes is their business. But in that Somali culture is pirates, people that have dug their trench inside our country. If anybody wants to admit it or not, means that we have an element amongst us inside our country, and that element goes against the morals and standards of America. That's where it goes. It goes against that. And it wants to crush out certain ethnic beliefs. It wants to, it just wants to contaminate our freedoms of religion and our freedoms in our country. It's already took its toll on the UK and Ireland and, London, Paris, France, and the Europe, the UK. And it's not looking very good, but this American First Act is including that, if the UK wants to keep going on the trend that they're going, then pretty much the administration is going to say, hey, you pretty much fixing to be on your own. And then they attacked Elon Musk with a fine of $140 million. So we're talking about an American citizen, an American-based network, Twitter, X, you know, Elon Musk. It's all American-made and built to have a foreigner such as Europe, the EU, attack an American citizen over the freedoms of speech that we practice inside our country, which means that our freedoms are not welcome anywhere else, is what it says. If our freedoms are good enough for us, then why are they not good enough for everybody else? I don't know. But it appears that you can't just say what's on your mind and say the truth. And Elon, he found out that the hard way. He was being told he had to pay some kind of crazy fine to EU to so they pretty much attempted to extort, no matter who likes him or who don't like him, but to extort an American. Elon Musk he's an American citizen, and to attack him for $140 million, you know, is an extortion, you know, to try to tell a person inside our free country, this is another country coming into your country, a whole nother country coming into your country and telling you what to say, what to think, how to feel, and if you didn't, you'd be imprisoned or fined heavily. And then you go back and you say, in the War of the Revolution, the the imperial kings and queens would come in America's lands and they would stamp that tree or brand a tree. And if you cut that tree down, you could be fined or imprisoned or both for trying to cut a tree down to make a chair or a table or a wagon wheel or any of the such, to say they own it. And they weaponized it, against the free will of the upcoming nation of America. And that sort of reflects back into what I'm saying about whenever you have a foreign influence inside your society. And whatever it was that put that in its own society, there was a reason behind that, and all of this talk about putting our guys and our women overseas in all these foreign battles, trying to give diplomacy out to people who won't ever accept it. You got to understand that they're not going to accept it. They want you to be their world police whenever their way of thinking gets their asses hemmed up. They want you to come in and be able to settle it. But they're never going to open up to American diplomacy because that's the whole problem all along. So here in this country, that's been well established here lately about the security measures taking place and everything that's going on. And you go back and you say, well, don't go believing that these drug laboratories all over Venezuela, because they're not. They're in the jungle. They're on the border between Venezuela and Colombia. Right now, they're over there battling it out right now with machine gun woods. You can fact check that. The Maduro-backed cartel military people, they're pretty much militants that guard the passage of drugs from Colombia through Venezuela to that coast over there, and then they get sorted out in a room somewhere in town and put on a boat, and that's how you get it, because you can't download drugs from South America. Can't be done. You have to have that in the room. Like you want to get drunk, you better have a bottle of whiskey set beside you. But what you got is got people's realities are getting signals are getting kind of blurred together there. What it means is you have to cut off the head of the serpent, and the rest of the body will fall. That's what that means. That the Russian and Chinese influence involved in the American territories and thinking is getting misconstrued to where we have dictators inside our hemisphere. You gotta understand that. Like I said in that video, pointing missiles and weaponizing soldiers and people against you as a free American. Killing your kids, killing your daughters, your sons, your relatives with the poison. And then all of a sudden, that little line in the sand gets drawn, and there we go. There's a fence right there. Go to the gate and ask if you can come in. If you're already here, we had rules long before you ever showed up. Said you're not getting any public assistance from the free taxpayers' money that we earn, we pay for to support you. And if you want to go through legalized immigration, you don't even qualify for public assistance for the first 5 years. People don't know that. And then, it was seen coming long ago that, you know, people don't want to believe this, but whenever a president such as Vladimir Putin steps in front of the cameras worldwide and utters the word Nazi out of his mouth, then pay attention to that. People want to say there's two sides to it. There's their side, and then there's a lie or something misconstrued. But the military of Russia, the reasons are still the same. They don't get changed to different reasons down the road. It means that whenever you have Russian ethnic group people that have been Russian in their family generations for centuries inside the Ukraine territories. Their kids, their daughters, their sons, they all speak Russian. They live Russian. They practice Russian beliefs. They live in a Russian style house. They're Russian. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And then you have somebody from the EU, you gotta understand this, and some other left-thinking organizations coming in there, propping up the president and the most corrupt. You gotta understand it. Ukraine was known to be corrupt. All the way across that whole little fucking country over there. Corrupt. And that means in the government and in the military ranks. So I know that I said that word corruption, but live by the sword, die by the sword. That's Vladimir Zelensky's demise. And he's already had people discussing it with Israel for defection. And the same thing's going on with Maduro. Unfortunately, Maduro isn't in a situation to debate. Means that real intelligent report says Maduro's pacing the floors, and last time somebody checked, he was suffering from insomnia. He had been up 24 hours pacing the floor. Could you imagine? You're talking about affiliates of certain syndicates and stuff that they do it daily, drag a person outside and chop their freaking head off with a machete. They just do. They, the Colombian drug lords and the cartel members and stuff, yeah. Maduro has been their poster boy for a while. Apparently, he's not sleeping very well because of his company that he keeps. And the offer of $50 million for his bounty, you see, is very tasteful, you see. That's a tasty, tasty amount of money right there, $50 million. That means there's probably more than one country right now with people involved that's trying to put him in the back seat back there and deliver him up, you see. And that's a capias, which means it's a physical body, dead or alive. So in that, you got to put some more things together, and you have to say, okay, let's talk about insurgents. sleeper cells. You know. Last time I went to the Horn of Africa in Pakistan, they had what everybody else has. They have big fancy Rockwell metal lathes, foundries. They have everything it takes to make whatever needs to be made. They just do. The firearms and stuff that were seized in one of the uh, FBI raids in this country involved multiple weapons manufactured ran by people from Somalia in the Middle East. A direct contact to them, it was weapons. The machining on the weapons, unassembled. The unassembled weapons that were being shipped in matched the machining on weapons in other countries, on battlefronts, war weapons, fully automatic machine guns, 50 cal. So now you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people that came inside this country. You never know. There could be somebody just living a modest living in your subdivision, in your neighborhood, in your town that has an arsenal of ammunition and weapons and people around them that actually know how to use them. Soldiers, you have to understand that. These guys are soldiers, urban combat warfare trained, jungle trained soldiers. And if anybody knows what it was like to go inside those urban streets over there in Bakalaka, inside every little shack, every little house, every little hole in the ground, everything. You never know when something's just going to unalive you over there. Those same individuals and same associations of individuals, if you didn't already know this by now, is going to be that element that was inside Kuwait, Afghan, northern Pakistan, inside urban cities, you know. Then you start running the numbers on it and you try to look at it from a broad spectrum, not your neck of the woods, not your street, not your neighborhood, but your spectrum. My bubble is about 100 miles wide. And you have people that are in vulnerable positions. You have your elder care facilities, hospitals, your schools. And when you're talking about thousands of individuals with access to weapons and a jihad of whatever, then it becomes a hostage situation. And you have to understand the nature of what I'm talking about. Hostages are a well-known use of tactics in the Horn of Africa up through the little gap between Yemen, and hostages are on the menu, and not to mention Israel and the Houthis. But inside this country, it takes a massive amount of force to bring that out of your urban development regions, which means that whenever you say, well, we'll just use infrared, we can see them at night, we can blah, blah, blah. Okay, are they friendly civilians, Americans? How do you know the pirates? Who are they? Through an infrared. They're also known to use their own people as human shields, you see. People like Maduro and others, they'll be willing to put their people out there as human shields to protect them and their interests. And I think that when you have thousands and thousands and thousands of individuals that are inside your country that have all of these characteristics about them, from geographics of origin, and it goes on teachings behind some of that, you kind of want to sit back and think, well, whenever you want to say you're going to dig yourself in, I'm going to dig in, I'm going to make sure I got this, I'm going to make sure I got plenty of this, I'm going to make sure I got plenty of this and that, and then you say, okay, flashback, Bakalaka Street. Do you not think that these individuals have capabilities of improvised weapons? IEDs. They know how to take some pipe and a welder and some chemicals or a propane tank, whatever. I'm talking shit from the neighborhood. And make something that'll blow you and your house and your family and your kids down inside some rubble. These are the guys that have my most interest. I mean, you ask yourself that question and you say, hey, What's this going to be like? And then you just assume you better find yourself a fortified structure. It takes about 24 inches or so of sand or soil to protect you from certain projectiles that was being made in that desert over there through Pakistan and Afghanistan regions on machines inside little shacks and mud huts where they was making gun barrels and ammunition and weapons right from scratch, right out of the scrap pile. Well, it's the environment that we're all in. We're involved in this, and I keep saying, that whenever the water and the food, whoever controls that controls the greater part of a battle, and then you'll move up to fuel. You know, but I mean, what you know and what you learn from each individual that might have enough common sense to get out of the ring, be more than willing to tell you that the worst part of battle, you know, you have the better part of the society out here in the real world that just kind of they're not taking, they're not being told the truth, they're not being told the the dirty laundry facts about a lot of things, only because it's not to impose panic, in the American people. They don't want to panic the whole neighborhood. Well, whenever you have Middle Eastern background individual that, for no other apparent reason, shoots a member of the National Guard. It doesn't matter if it was a member of the National Guard. It's just this person took it upon themselves. It's a lie. It wasn't about that person and their self and their own whatever. It was about the people around them and the belief. No other reason. Why would another human being have a desire to walk up to another human being and just end that person because they didn't like something about them? What does it take? You got to be able to see both sides of that battle, and you have to say, well, I heard a well-known white girl, very attractive, by the way, and she's very popular on her channel, discussing how she's in fear that we're going to lose the white ethnic group. Me personally, I kind of find that hilarious. for people to assume, you know, they're going to lose their ethnic group based on, you know, what's going on. I had a discussion with my dad earlier today. He's 87 years old, man. He's been around for a while. And my point was exactly, and that's what he said. If you were from Somalia and you said, I know all the reasons why I am trying to escape this place they call Somalia, my goal and dreams are to get to America and to be an American, claim myself as an American, to blend in with the American culture of thinking. And then you have that element that comes with that. You know, the element around it. And it lives in disguise inside these communities, and it lives inside the Asian communities and the Hispanic communities and the Black communities. That element is there. The one that says they're going to rob you, they're going to take what you got, you're going to give them this, and you're going to just shut the fuck up. That element. Or they're going to steal billions of dollars worth of your money, send it over there to the rest of their pirate gangsters in Somalia. You know that movie about the container boat where they took the captain hostage, held him on that little escape boat out there, and then they locked that one guy up in American territory. He was being housed at USP up in Indiana. The element has always been known, and I listened to the Secretary of Defense, and he had some things to say in similarity to the discussion about the Ronald Reagan days when Ronald Reagan was known as a cowboy, in the movies that he acted in sometimes. And he knew them all. So you got that way of thinking, and his way of thinking was one of the reasons that we brought the Cold War to an end. It's the same way of the thinking of the president's administration. Present was the description of his words. We have all rights in our beliefs as Americans, and to stand on our constitutions and our founders' laws that says, hey, we're Americans, our establishments of Americans. And what we were not willing to put up with from anybody else on side this earth. We put rules in place that established our democracies and thinking, and it kept us clear-headed about our flag. We finally got our own way of thinking, and it's been good so far. And we don't want somebody to come in here and start establishing influence from foreign lands again. We we repelled that in every way to establish our country. We stood our ground, and the ones that seen it the way we seen it, then they joined in that fight. That was the battle. You say, this is where we're at. This is our piece of dirt on this planet to raise our kids the way we want to raise our kids, to hand down our influence into our children. And I had this discussion with somebody earlier yesterday about, or the day before, if you want your son to become like you, then you have to be. And that son has to be in your presence. You can't be off doing its own thing. Your son has to be around you, and your daughters have to be around their mothers, you know. And whatever you are, they will, a certain part of them, become that person. And that person's way of thinking. You know, that's the ideological thinking that goes on nowadays about how people don't want other people's influence on their children, and they just seem to can't be doing anything about it, you know. And it's like, yeah, you can do something about it. You can definitely do something about it. You know, we have every opportunity inside our free nation to say, hey, if there's something going on at that school, then homeschool your children. But then that robs them of their intellect, where they can't learn to be around other people and all of that. It goes back to a bunch of rabbit holes. And I remember when I was a kid, hell, I was in the 5th grade, and I had wood shop with table saws and jigsaws and wood and shit that'll chop your fingers off. And all of those ideas of that have dwindled to where not only so you have to understand, whenever you can affect a country, how to affect that country. Most of all, something that's going to it's going to wreak havoc on people, is to influence their children. See, that's how it goes. And the more of the children that get influenced by certain things over a certain amount of years, then eventually they're going to have some kind of relationship with another person and maybe have children. And their children, by that time, at that school or that classroom or that environment, you can kind of see my point. They've been so influenced through that alone that it actually changes your fucking society. It can change your economy. It's not just you and your children in your house. It's everybody's kids in everybody's houses. You know, we know all the best solutions to cure the society. You know, there's, uh, you know, there's a cure for anything, I suppose, but it has to be logical thinking. I mean, it's got to go back to what we have in writing that says we have to establish ourselves as Americans. Uh, your freedom of beliefs and expressions and all of that was unimpeded. You know? And that's what made us the great nation. When we take all of our founders' rules and foundations as American citizens, and we leave the skin color alone, leave the religion alone, and we just live amongst each other in peace. You know, he who is he who is without sin, they say, cast the first stone. I think I heard that one time. So it's hard to believe that people understand that they've been in the kabuki theater so long that it's affected them. You know, if you have this thought inside your mind when you look at another person and they're the opposite of your race, white, black, tan, if that's the first thing you see in your brain, that's the only thing you're going to see in your brain. You have to look at another human being as another human being. It's not about the color. It's not about any of that. Is you got some smart brain in your head and you'd like to share it with somebody else and maybe they could make it even better. In thinking, that's America. You see, ingenuity. You know, Adolf Hitler he wasn't over there making all of these planes and boats and guns and stuff. He was way too busy. He was up in some building somewhere talking to the generals and everybody else. He wasn't down there hammering out the rivets, was he? That was German ingenuity. It didn't come out too well for that. But anyhow, whenever you have a war between ideological thinking, which means that whenever I would be pretty pissed off if my granddaughter came home from school and she was upset because they were trying to make her learn Spanish, to literally make her learn a different language and to use that language instead of the English that I call American. You know, it is English, the books, the signs, you know, everything. Street signs, directions, whatever, English. It's an English country. It's part of being American. But I actually know some folks that speak different language. And their family and them's been inside this country for over 100 years, and there's still parts of that family that was born here, raised here, everything here that don't know the full aspect of English. And yes, they give these people driver's license. It's sort of like that goes to thinking we should just change out all of our road signs all the way across the country to accommodate people that speak a certain language. And forget about our English that's been around here for over 300-400 years now. Longer than that. That don't just sound like it's going to go over very well. It's bigger than you and it's bigger than me on all these goings on, but it's simple as KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. And you're thinking. I think that people should be prepared to see things that they never really thought they could see, because believe me, when you send some of these guys over there to a different country and things start going on, they come back a complete different person, shocked of the things they've seen, things they had to go through, things they had to do, all of that. So whenever you panic and you find yourself sitting in a room with 50, 60 other people, and you're all panicked because there's a guy at the door up there that came into this country and he won't let you leave. Him and his buddies has got a couple of something inside that room and them openings and them exits. This says they can unalive everybody inside that room. Change your way of thinking. Whenever that saying comes out and you say, you're going to call this number, and it could be 3-4 minutes away when death's on your door in seconds. Which goes to the second. It shouldn't be infringed, and it hasn't. May or may not have mentioned for you less fortunate people out there in society that says, hey, but you can't have this and you can't have this, you can't have that, but ball and cap and flintlock is still perfectly legal. There's a reason behind that. Improvised, they talk about those fucking crazy ass improvised weapons. But that's a fact in the Revolutionary War. Improvised weapons, picks and shovels, if they had to. That's what it takes to fight off tyranny. The foreign influence, this foreign influence inside our society, our free society. It's giving way to ideological thinking, freedoms of speeches, and words are weapons. Go back to this Elon Musk on how he refused to give up people's personal identities on his system. And his system is based in America, not over there in Europe. And he said no. So they said, well, we're going to fine you $140 million. Anyways, okay. No, you're not. Fuck the Queen and fuck the King. This is America. It ain't Europe. It's America. You can take it. You can be the fucking dictator of a country, and you can call me on the phone, and you can say whatever the fuck you want to say, you know. And I'm gonna tell you to kiss my fucking ass. This is America. You don't fit in America. That's why we're America, because we don't have to tolerate that bullshit. Our tolerances, which is a good word, tolerant. We've just become so tolerant, in our schools, our children, exposures, in our societies. We've become tolerant to this stifling, impeding way of thinking inside our society. And it's not unlike the ones that's been alleviated in the past, you know. And it's sort of like I said, that kind of in a brutish way, and I admit I did, but somebody asked me, and I said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to Venezuela. We're going to get rid of Maduro one way or another. All of the wealth of the oil of Venezuela, and figure out a way to put that back in the hands of the Venezuelan people. The people. See, the economy, the people. Somebody says impossible. I said, well, hide and watch. Whether you like it or not. I mean, the immigration, you can't say, well, Venezuela ain't going to take me back because I'm a criminal. And they're going to say, oh, yes, we can now. See, this little question in this Ecuador thing coming up here recently about these questions involving the Ecuadorian prisons that are housing these Venezuelan inmates for the U.S. government. Because they'll soon be going home. You see how that works. The fact of the matter is the oil coming out of Venezuela flowing into Cuba ends, you see, ends at that point. The only other alternative that a country like Cuba has is to import that oil from Russia. The majority of it comes from Venezuela. They have like I said, they have some rigs out there, but not for long. And the fact of the matter is whenever they put an oil trades embargo in on Cuba back in the 50s, well, a lot of the cars and vehicles on the island of Cuba had to resort to alternative means, which means that the parts where they couldn't get parts to fix the old cars that came from America and other places, so they had to improvise and all of that stuff because of the lack of fuel. And one of the guys that built like 3,000 or so many, three or 4,000 vehicle conversions that actually run on vegetable oil, used vegetable oil. Figured out a way to make a gasoline engine work on vegetable oil. And then the USA at that time embargoed that idea out of America because they put some Cuban guy uh, that made an engine run on vegetable oil in Cuba in the 50s. So they put a trades embargo on that to say they didn't want that information being leaked out to the United States in the 50s. You know, gasoline engines that actually run on vegetable oil. It's a truth. You can fact check that. So Cuba's not immune to oil shortages, fuel shortages, or any of that. I mean, they're on an island. You know, they go back to eating octopus on a daily basis. But this little thing with Venezuela is exactly that. It's going to be a coup, more than likely. Parts of the leadership of the Venezuelan military will defect, and some of them already have, like I mentioned, some generals. Uh, so the fact is that's one of the things that the administration is trying to give back to the American people is the freedom to not have cartels so deeply encrusted into the American economy and your neighborhoods, your streets, your schools, your political offices. If you ain't been paying attention, some of the public officials that's been arrested on indictments for having pounds of cocaine in their safe and their drug distribution organizations going out through their office, inside their public office. So the corruption goes deep, you know, and eventually, I'll call this one off here in a little bit, but eventually, it's either just, I'm going to do a video about it anyway. I might as well do it. And if people join, they can. If they don't, they don't. But the moral of the story is when you live by corruption, you die by corruption, you know, and that's Maduro's problem. That's Vladimir Zelensky in Ukraine. That's his problem. And some of the other things that's going to happen over in the UK. And I get it. We're not going to get ourselves involved in another foreign conflict when we have potentially thousands and thousands and thousands of insurgents that are here, what they call sleepers. And the only way to get rid of that is to seal the borders, like I said. It's already been sealed. Uh, all the shipping, inboard, outboard shipping, cargo manifest, inspections, everything going on there. Ain't nobody getting across that little piece of water out there from Venezuela on a boat. And how would you like to have that guy? I mean, that job's got to be hard to fill right there. I mean, what do you got to tell a guy? Hey, the American destroyer fleet with all kinds of shit is out there watching that water. So you got to get in this boat and go out there and go across there. How'd you like? How'd you like to be that guy? So anyhow, now the next step that's going to take place and southern Mexico border at Guatemala. They've been stepping up security forces in that zone and putting more scrutiny under people coming in from their border, coming across into their border into Mexico. So that's a big kind of a sign right there. And then if you don't remember that discussion everybody was having about the Panama Canal and how the America was going to say, hey, we want that back. There's your refund. See, and the fact of the matter is you know you have to give the lands back to the people one way or another. Whenever King Edward came over and decided he was just going to take everything from the American settlers, you know, and claim it for his own, his kingdoms. And same thing went on with Spain and France, you know. So eventually we said, hey, we're not going to take this shit no more, you know. We ain't getting nowhere. We're not growing as a culture. We're growing another man's wealth, you see. So goes back to thinking. So if you live by the sword, you will certainly die by the sword. And until next time, I catch you cats later. Zombie out.